Hey there, you are on the Fall Asleep with Margot channel. Take a deep breath and a slow exhale. Now close your eyes. What do you hear in these few seconds? The beat of your own heart? The rush of blood in your ears? Distant sounds from outside the window? Or nothing? That special, dense silence that suddenly formed around you and inside you. It's about this silence that we're going to talk today, about loneliness. But let me warn you right away. This won't be the kind of conversation you're used to. No psychological self-help. No advice on how to stop suffering and start living. No trendy sociology about the loneliness epidemic of the 21st century, the crisis of social connections, and millennials, the loneliest generation in history. No. We're going much, much deeper. Have you ever considered that loneliness isn't just an emotion, not just a feeling that comes and goes like a headache or fatigue after a workday? It is a space, a whole universe, an inner room that people have retreated to throughout human history. Sometimes circumstances push them there by force. Sometimes they strove for it as the highest goal, as the only possible way of being. And this room always looked different. It had different furniture, different light streamed through the windows, different fears and different hopes hung on its walls. Today, you and I will crack open the doors to these rooms of different eras. We will become invisible observers, ghosts traveling through time. We will try to hear what a person heard, left in complete silence. What did they think about when there was no internet, no books, not even a companion nearby? What did they fear in that silence? What did they seek? Who did they wait for? And perhaps, by looking closely at their loneliness, at their experience, we might finally be able to see our own a little more clearly. But before we take the first step into this journey, I'll ask you one question. It might seem strange, even absurd, but just let it settle in your mind. Here it is. Can you imagine a world where the very possibility of being alone simply doesn't exist? A world where the word I has no separate private space, where your body, your sleep, your thoughts, everything belongs not only to you, but to others as well. Try to imagine it right now, an absolutely different order of existence, and that's exactly where we'll begin. Chapter 1, Pre-Literate Times. Loneliness as mortal danger. Let's travel back, far, far back, so far that humanity has no writing, no cities, not even permanent dwellings, a time we often dismissively call prehistoric, as if history only begins with the first clay tablets. But this was an era lasting hundreds of times longer than all of our written civilization. And in this era, our brain, our instincts, our deepest fears were formed. Imagine a world where private property hasn't been invented yet, where there is no separate room for you, no personal bed, no personal time. Imagine the Stone Age. Not like in Hollywood movies, with muscular heroes in animal skins, but the real one, cold, hungry, full of mortal dangers at every step. Back then, the world wasn't divided into nature and civilization. It was a single, whole, pulsating organism. You are part of a small community, a tribe, a clan. There are about 20 to 30 of you, and each of them is not just a neighbor, but an extension of yourself. Your sleep, your food, your safety, everything depends on them. You sleep in the same space, a cave, a hut made of mammoth bones, a shelter, with a dozen, maybe even 24 people. You hear their snoring, their coughing, their muttering in sleep, their frightened cries when someone has a nightmare. You smell the odor of their unwashed bodies, the smell of smoke ingrained in their hair and skin. This is not discomfort. This is the norm. This is the very fabric of life. This is safety. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer tribes that have survived to this day in Africa, the Amazon, and New Guinea confirm a remarkable thing. In these cultures, the concept of loneliness, in our sense, simply doesn't exist. There is a word for being alone, but it describes a physical state, not an inner experience. It means being out of sight of others, and this state is always temporary and always dangerous. Ask yourself, in such a reality, can you just up and leave for a solitary walk to think about life? What would your kin say? How would they perceive it? Most likely, they'd look at you as if you were crazy, or as a traitor, or as someone possessed by evil spirits. To go off alone means jeopardizing not only your own life, but the life of the entire community. Every hunter counts. Every woman gathering roots and edible plants is important for everyone's survival. You are not a separate unit. You are part of a single body. Here, loneliness is not a philosophical category or a subject for poetic reflection. It is a direct, immediate physical danger. To be left alone means becoming easy prey for a saber-toothed tiger, a cave bear, or, even worse, a hostile tribe prowling for prey. To get lost in the endless forest, die of hunger, fall into a crevice, break a leg, and no one will come to help. Your cry will only be heard by predators. An Atlas, a hero of myths, could hold up the sky, but an ordinary person held on to their own. And this wasn't weakness. It was the condition for the species' survival. Exile from the tribe. That was the most terrible punishment imaginable in that era. It was worse than death, because death could come quickly. But exile meant a slow, agonizing death from hunger, cold, and fear. And, more importantly, complete erasure from memory. You were rubbed out, crossed off. You ceased to exist as a person, as an individual, as a name. But where, then, is that inner room we talked about in the beginning? Did an ancient man have a soul in need of solitude? Was he just a biological automaton reacting to environmental dangers? No. The soul was there, and it was born. But it was born not in physical solitude, which simply couldn't exist, but in altered states of consciousness, in trance, in ritual, in mystery. Imagine an evening, deep night, the campfire, the only source of light and heat in the pitch-black, absolute darkness enveloping the campsite. The flame dances, casting bizarre, pulsating shadows on the cave walls or the shelter's canopy. People sit in a tight circle around the fire. You see their faces lit from below. They seem alien, mysterious, unlike their daytime selves. Someone starts beating a rhythm on a drum covered with skin. The rhythm quickens, becomes hypnotic, obsessive. It enters the blood, makes the heart beat in unison. The gaze fixes on the dancing flames, unable to look away. Fatigue after a long hunt, slight hunger, the monotonous, vibrating sound of the drum, and consciousness begins to swim. The boundaries between I and not I blur. You go beyond yourself. The first mystics, shamans, seers, healers, these were the first explorers of loneliness. They entered it not physically, but internally, through ritual, through dance, through pain. They left the circle of their tribesmen without moving from the spot. Their loneliness was a portal to the spirit world, the world of ancestors, the world of another reality. It was a functional, frightening, and yet honorable loneliness journey. They stepped beyond the ordinary to obtain knowledge for the community, where the herd of deer is roaming, when the rain will come, how to heal a sick child. They returned from this inner loneliness with answers, and the community greeted them as heroes. Tell me, can you hear within yourself, in the deepest recesses of your psyche, echoes of this ancient, archaic fear? When we say, I need support, I can't cope alone, I'm afraid of being alone, doesn't there resonate in these words the ancient, prehistoric terror of a creature whose life depended entirely on the pack, the tribe, the clan? We've forgotten the caves and saber-toothed tigers, We've forgotten the cold and hunger, but our body remembers. Our limbic system, the oldest part of the brain, remembers. We are social animals, and the fear of isolation, the fear of being exiled, the fear of being outside the circle, is wired into us at the level of basic instincts, at the level of species survival. And this fear hasn't gone anywhere. It's just changed its form. Chapter 2: Sedentary Life, the Birth of Writing, and the Invention of the Inner World. Time flows. Slowly, very slowly, like a river in the dry season, but inexorably. Millennia pass. Humanity makes discoveries that forever change its destiny. It invents agriculture and stops nomadic wandering in search of game. It builds the first cities: Jericho, Çatalhöyük, Mohenjo-Daro. It domesticates animals, which become its companions and providers. It invents the plow and forever changes the face of the earth. Then, something historians call the Neolithic Revolution of Consciousness occurs. Humanity invents writing. Pause for a moment and think about the true magic of this invention. Before, the word existed only at the moment of utterance. It was born, sounded, and instantly flew away, disappearing without a trace, like smoke from a fire. It couldn't be saved, couldn't be passed on precisely, couldn't be returned to a year later. Human memory is an unreliable vessel. Now, the word can be fixed. On a clay tablet, on papyrus, on a palm leaf, on parchment. And crucially, with the advent of writing, humans, for the first time, have the opportunity to conduct a dialogue with themselves. A real, deep, reflective dialogue. You can write down your thought, read it the next day, be surprised. Did I really think that? Argue with your yesterday's self, add to it, clarify, refute it. Writing creates an echo effect within consciousness. It allows us to step beyond the immediate stream of thoughts and look at ourselves from the outside. It gives birth to reflection. Look at ancient Greece, that amazing civilization which, in just a few centuries, laid the foundations for all of Western philosophy, science, and art. The famous maxim, "Know thyself," "Gnothi se auton," was inscribed at the entrance to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Think about that phrase. What does it imply? It implies that within you there is a hidden territory, a whole undiscovered continent worth exploring, a continent no other person has set foot on. And for this exploration, you need to distance yourself. You need to step away from the noise of the agora, from political disputes, from the cries of fishmongers and arguing sophists. You need solitude. And the philosophers withdrew. They withdrew into gardens. Epicurus bought a house with a garden near Athens and taught his students in the shade of olive trees. He believed true pleasure was not drunkenness and orgies, as his enemies later slandered, but calm contemplation, friendly conversation away from political hustle, reflection on the nature of things. Plato's academy wasn't a building, but a sacred grove dedicated to the hero Academus, a place for walks and leisurely dialogues under the open sky. Aristotle walked with his students along the paths of the Lyceum. The Stoics built an entire philosophy of the inner fortress. For them, the external world was a flow beyond control. The only thing in our power is our attitude towards it, and to cultivate that right attitude, one must know how to be alone. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, a man who, by definition, is never alone. He's always surrounded by an entourage, bodyguards, advisors, slaves, petitioners. His life is a continuous public spectacle. And what does this man do in his rare moments of peace? In a military tent on the banks of the Danube, by the light of an oil lamp, he writes a book, Meditations, a book addressed to himself. He dialogues with himself, convincing himself not to fear death, not to be angry with fools, to remember the transience of all things. This is pure, absolute monologue directed inward. Writing allowed an emperor to create his inner world, impenetrable to any of his subjects. In antiquity, Loneliness ceased to be merely a void to be filled with noise and chatter. It became a tool, a laboratory, a workshop where personality is forged, character is formed, thought is born. And what was happening in the East during this same time, while the Mediterranean debated the nature of virtue? Here, loneliness was elevated to a high art, not even art, a path. The Taoist hermit withdraws high into the mountains, not to escape taxes or hide from enemies, though that happened too. The main goal is to merge with the Tao. The Tao is the great void, the great flow from which everything arises and to which everything returns. For a Taoist, loneliness in the mountains is not a loss, but the greatest gain. He becomes an integral part of the landscape. He listens to the silence and hears in it the breath of the universe. He looks at the mist shrouding the peaks and understands that his eye is just as temporary a mist. This is the path of non-action, the path of contemplation, the path of merging. The Buddhist monk. For him, solitary meditation is the only possible path to enlightenment, to nirvana, to escaping the endless wheel of suffering, samsara. Here, loneliness is not just a condition for thinking. It is a surgical operation to remove the very illusion of I. The main question shifts from, what do I think, to, who is the one who thinks? And to find the answer to that question, you must turn off the external noise, completely, absolutely, without remainder. Imagine this practice. You sit in the lotus position in a small cell or under a tree in the jungle. You observe your mind. You see thoughts come and go like clouds. You learn not to identify with them. You look at your anger, your lust, your pride, and you don't say, I am angry. You say, anger has arisen. This is colossal inner work, and it's only possible in absolute silence and solitude. The Buddha didn't leave the palace by chance and wander alone for 6 years before attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So, an amazing historical paradox emerges. The more complex society became, the more people lived in cities, the more acute the need for solitude became. As if the human psyche, compressed by external social pressure, created a counterbalance, an inner space of freedom. First in the form of philosophical gardens, then in the form of cells, then in the form of personal diaries. Man learned to build his inner fortress, strong walls, a quiet inner courtyard, a personal temple. Why? To protect the most precious treasure, his self. To understand who you really are when no one is watching, no one demands anything from you, no one awaits your reaction. Chapter 3. Hermits, Mystics, and the Burden of the Solitary Soul Before the Face of God. Now let's travel to medieval Europe, a world overshadowed by Christianity. And here is born perhaps the most radical, most heroic, most frightening, and most sublime form of loneliness in human history. Monastic seclusion, desert dwelling, anchoritism. The early desert fathers, Anthony the Great, Paul of Thebes, Mary of Egypt. Hundreds and thousands of men and women who went into the Egyptian desert, the Syrian desert, into caves, into the mountains. Why did they do it? The surface answer, to escape worldly temptations, is too simplistic. They went into battle, the most terrifying battle of their lives. Imagine it. You leave not just a city, you leave all of human reality. You go to a place where there is no one, absolutely no one. Only sand, rocks, scorching sun by day, and freezing cold by night. Wild animals, poisonous snakes, scorpions. You voluntarily condemn yourself to a monstrous, all-consuming silence, where every sound, your own cough, the rustle of sand, the cry of a night bird, sounds deafeningly loud. And in this silence, you are left alone with yourself, with all your thoughts, with all your fears, with all your desires, which in the world could be satisfied or drowned out, but here they explode with unprecedented force. There is no one to distract you, no one to comfort you, no one to encourage you, only you and your thoughts, and the one you seek, God, and the one you fear to meet, the devil. The lives of the saints are full of stories of demons appearing to hermits. They took the form of wild beasts, lions, bears, dragons, to frighten them. They appeared as beautiful, half-naked women, tempting them with lust. They cried out behind the cell walls with the voices of the dying, calling for help. They whispered thoughts of despair. God has abandoned you. You are useless. Your prayer is empty. Why are you torturing yourself? This was not metaphor. For medieval man, demons were as real as the stones underfoot, and the battle with them was real. The loneliness of the desert dweller is the field of spiritual warfare, the place where the fate of an immortal soul is decided. It is ascesis, the training of the spirit through the mortification of the flesh. It is a test of strength. It is a struggle with oneself, with one's dark side. Anthony the Great, who lived in the desert for over 80 years, said that a monk remaining in his cell is like a fish remaining in water. Just as a fish taken onto land dies, so a monk, leaving his cell for the world, dies spiritually. Later, hermetism softened, taking the form of communal monasteries, koinobia, where monks lived, prayed, and worked together. But even in such a community, each monk had his own cell, a small, cold room with a hard bed, a lectern for books, and an icon, his personal desert. And in this desert, he spent hours in silence, engaged in the Jesus prayer, the unceasing repetition of, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner." These words were meant to grow into the heart, to become not just sounds, but the breath of the soul. The goal of all this? To hear not oneself, but God. To purify the soul of worldly noise, of passions, of attachments so completely that in this absolute silence, the still, small voice of God could finally break through. In silence, God is known, said the Desert Fathers. Imagine this incredible intensity of inner life. You sit in the dark, by the light of a lampada, alone within four walls. And in your head, eternity, sin, salvation, hell, and heaven. No distractions. No social media, no news, no chats with colleagues, no TV, no music. Only you and your soul. Only you and your destiny being decided here and now in this cell. Frightening? Unbearable? For many, yes. Monks went mad from such pressure, fell into heresies, fled back to the world, unable to endure the test of silence. But for those who endured, this was the only true path, the path to one's true self, the path to God. And there was another side to medieval loneliness, the loneliness of the ordinary layperson. In a world where life was rigidly regulated by the community, the guild, the craft, the parish, the extended family, a person was rarely alone. But when it did happen, for instance, during a serious illness when you were isolated in a separate room to avoid infecting others, or in prison for debt or crime, or on your deathbed after family had said their goodbyes and only the priest remained, this loneliness was filled with a very special meaning. You stood before God without intermediaries. The priest could absolve sins, but you took your last breath alone. And at that moment, you were utterly alone. It was the most frightening and the most important moment of life. I wonder, is there anything left of this medieval experience in our modern, secular, God-emptied world? Chapter 4. The modern age, the birth of the monster city and loneliness in the crowd. The Industrial Revolution, late 18th to 19th century. The world changes faster and more radically than in the previous millennia. Man invents the steam engine, builds railways, starts textile mills. Villages empty, people flock by the thousands to cities where factory chimneys smoke. And here, a paradox occurs that will become the main theme of philosophy and art for the next 200 years. Physically, man ceases to be alone. He is surrounded by thousands of people in the factory, standing shoulder to shoulder with other workers at the machine, on the street, jammed with carriages and pedestrians, in the tram or omnibus, packed full, in the theater or pub. But it is precisely in this crowd, in this accumulation of human bodies, that the very existential loneliness we talk about today is born. Why does this happen? Because the connections between people become functional. They lose their warmth. You sell your labor to the factory owner. He pays you a wage. You don't know each other. You're bound by nothing but money. You don't know the name of the person standing next to you at the neighboring machine. He's just another cog in a huge machine. You don't know the names of the neighbors in your multi-story tenement building, living wall to wall, because they change every year. The mechanical world, the world of capitalism and big cities, destroyed the old communal bond. It deprived man of the warmth of a small homeland, the village community where everyone knew each other from childhood. But it gave nothing in return except anonymity and alienation. Man became lonely, yet simultaneously lost the skill of being alone. He found himself in a strange, frightening space, in a crowd of strange and different faces. The romantics of the 19th century were the first to feel this new pain and tried to find a cure. They flee from the impersonality of cities. They seek salvation in the bosom of wild nature, in the mountains, by the sea. Recall the paintings of Caspar David Friedrich, the great German romantic artist. Wanderer above the sea of fog. A small human figure, standing with his back to the viewer on a mountain peak. Before him lies an endless sea of clouds, mountain peaks, infinity. What does he feel? He is alone with a majestic and utterly indifferent world. No one will share this experience with him. No one will understand what is in his soul. This loneliness is sublime, tragic, frightening, yet simultaneously beautiful. It becomes the main source of inspiration for poets, artists, and composers. A new cultural hero is born, the Byronic hero. Gloomy, disillusioned, jaded, a solitary wanderer, cursing the crowd and misunderstood by it. Childe Harold, Manfred, Lermontov's demon. They wear their loneliness as a badge of chosenness, as a seal of damnation, but also as a crown. Loneliness becomes fashionable, melancholic, poetic. It is no longer a battle with demons in the desert, like Anthony the Great's, nor philosophical contemplation like the Stoics. It is a subtle, aestheticized experience of one's own exclusivity that fuels creativity. But the reverse, much darker side of this phenomenon also appears. The urban crowd, as we've said, is anonymous and indifferent, and in this anonymity lurks a terrible danger for the soul. Charles Dickens, the great chronicler of London. In Bleak House, Oliver Twist, The Old Curiosity Shop, he shows characters whose loneliness in the concrete jungle becomes unbearable, destructive. Little Nell, trudging along the roads of Victorian England. Oliver, a wanted by no one orphan. They are surrounded by people, yet utterly alone, and this loneliness is worse than hunger and cold. It sucks the soul dry. Or Fyodor Dostoevsky. His Petersburg is not a city of palaces and avenues, but a city of slums, tenement houses, taverns, and dark staircases. Raskolnikov, an utterly isolated young man in a huge, indifferent city. His room closet, like a coffin. His wandering through the city, talking to himself. His torments, his theory, his crime. All are born from monstrous isolation, from the feeling that you are needed by no one, that you are superfluous. Dostoevsky brilliantly shows how urban loneliness can drive a person to madness, to crime, to self-destruction. Man is broad, too broad, I would narrow him down, says his character. And this breadth in emptiness becomes a curse. The main question arises, one you've probably asked yourself at least once, walking down a noisy street or standing in a subway car. How did it happen that the more people there are around, the more acute the feeling of inner isolation can become? The answer offered by philosophers and sociologists is bleak. The mechanical world, the world of industrial capitalism, took away from man the old, proven forms of spiritual solitude: prayer, ritual, contemplation of nature, unhurried conversation with loved ones. But it gave nothing new in return. It left man alone with himself in the most unsuitable place for it, in a noisy, bustling, indifferent crowd. Man became more lonely than ever before, yet completely unlearned how to be alone beneficially for the soul. Silence began to frighten him, and he rushed to fill it with noise: newspapers, theaters, pubs, empty talk. Chapter 5: The Information Age. Loneliness in hyperconnectivity, the paradox of the millennium. And here we are, finally, in our own time. The era you and I live in, the beginning of the third millennium, the digital revolution, the information age. Stop and just think about what you currently have in your pocket. A small rectangular object, glass, plastic, metal. But this object possesses a truly magical, God-like power that our ancestors could only dream of. In your pocket, you have access to all human knowledge, to all the books ever written, to all the paintings ever painted, to all the music ever composed, to millions of films, lectures, podcasts, articles. And most importantly, in your pocket is a device that allows you to instantly, in a split second, connect with almost anyone on planet Earth. You can message a friend in Australia, see a photo of an acquaintance's breakfast from Argentina, participate in a discussion with people from Japan, Brazil, South Africa. Never in history have we been so connected to each other. We are hyper-connected. We are entangled in invisible digital threads. We are available 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know this feeling. Not invented, not imposed, but a real one that has visited everyone at least once. Late evening. You sit in the silence of your room. Maybe a cozy armchair, maybe a bed, maybe a windowsill. In your hand, your phone. The screen light illuminates your face. You scroll through the feed. Finger moves from bottom to top, bottom to top, bottom to top. Dozens, hundreds of messages. Someone posted a vacation photo. Someone wrote an angry political post. Someone is selling a course on successful success. Someone posted a cat meme. Someone is celebrating a birthday, and 100 people wrote happy birthday to them. Ads, news, gossip, scandals. Information noise is off the charts. It flows in a continuous stream, like a waterfall, like an avalanche. And amidst all this deafening flow, amidst hundreds of voices, opinions, faces, there is not one deep, real conversation. There are likes, those digital surrogates for attention. There are emojis, meant to denote emotions but not convey them. There are short, fragmentary comments. Agree. No, you're wrong. Cool. Nice. But there is no encounter. No dialogue where you open up and are understood. None of what connection between people is actually for. There is the opportunity to be visible to everyone, to broadcast a carefully retouched, cleaned up, filter-lit version of yourself. A successful, happy, witty, traveling, good eating, well-read, content version. We build this digital facade for years, investing more effort in it than in our real homes. And simultaneously with this, an acute, gnawing, deep-seated fear. The fear of appearing real. The fear of being vulnerable. The fear of admitting that you're sad, that you're lonely, that you're not coping. Because the ideal image we've worked so long and hard to build could collapse in an instant, crumble like a house of cards from one careless word. And then, loneliness would become complete and final. Our loneliness in the 21st century has become paradoxical, almost schizophrenic. We voluntarily, of our own free will, retreat into digital reclusion. We lock ourselves in a room, in a bubble, and spend hours there. But we cannot bear the silence. We immediately fill this room with other people's voices, other people's pictures, other people's opinions. We turn on a podcast so we don't hear our own thoughts. We scroll through the feed to avoid being alone with ourselves. We fear the silence inside this digital cell as much as ancient man feared the silence of the wild forest. It seems hostile, empty, unbearable to us. Sociologists and psychologists have been sounding the alarm for over a decade now. The level of subjectively experienced loneliness in developed countries is steadily rising. People report in surveys that they have no one to talk to intimately, that they have no real close friends, that they feel abandoned and unwanted. And this happens even to those who are married, have children, go to work, and interact on social media with hundreds of friends. The paradox of the digital age: the number of contacts grows, the quality of connections declines. At the same time, voluntary, conscious solitude, self-care, mindfulness practices, meditation, digital detox has become a trendy fad, an expensive and prestigious trend. We buy retreat packages, travel to special centers, pay for silence. We try to buy what was once a natural part of life, the ability to be alone with oneself. Think about the language we use. It betrays our inner drama completely. I'm overwhelmed by communication, we say. Communication has become a resource, a job to be done. It tires, exhausts, like physical labor. I need to recharge in solitude, we say, as if we were smartphones or electric cars needing an outlet. I need a break from people. People have become a source of noise, not a source of warmth. When was the last time you spent a whole hour in complete silence? Not silence with music in your headphones, not silence with a book, not silence with the TV on but muted, but absolute, total silence. Without a phone, without podcasts, without video, without external stimuli. Just sitting and observing the flow of your own thoughts, not trying to analyze them, structure them, use them productively. Not trying to meditate correctly, following instructions from an app, just observing, like watching clouds. Getting scary? Boring? Unbearable? Exactly. That is our main historical diagnosis. We have unlearned how to be in that most basic, ancient, primordially human state, the state of observing oneself. We have lost the key to the inner room, and if we do find it, we are afraid to turn it in the lock. Conclusion: loneliness as the continuous thread of human history. And so, our long journey comes to an end. We've traveled a huge distance, tens of thousands of years, from Stone Age campfires to glowing smartphone screens. What have we seen? What picture has unfolded before us? We have seen that loneliness was never the same. It was not a static feeling, unchanging like eye color. It, like a living being, like a river, like fire, evolved alongside us, alongside our society, our culture, our technology. It always reflected our understanding of the world, our understanding of the soul, and our understanding of man's place in this world. In prehistoric times, loneliness was pure, undiluted fear of death, fear of being eaten, freezing, getting lost. It was a physical, bodily terror. In antiquity, with the birth of philosophy and writing, loneliness became a tool for knowledge, a condition for looking inside oneself and understanding the structure of the universe. In the Middle Ages, under monastery vaults and in the heat of the deserts, loneliness turned into a battlefield for the soul's salvation. a place where man stood alone with God and the devil. In the industrial era, amidst city noise and machine clatter, loneliness became a tragic note in the symphony of progress. It split into the sublime loneliness of the Romantics and the humiliating, crushing loneliness of the little man in the crowd. And here we are, in the 21st century. We possess all the technologies for connection. We can talk to anyone, anytime. We have never been so available, but we have never been so lonely in our souls. Today, we find ourselves in a unique, unprecedented situation. We have all the external conditions to create healthy, meaningful, nurturing solitude. We have personal space, even if it's a small room or a corner in an apartment. We have time. Even if it always seems scarce, we can carve it out. We have access to the wisdom of the ages. Any book, any lecture, any philosophical teaching is available in 2 clicks. We can, at any moment, if we wish, retreat into our inner fortress. But we live in a system that, with all its might, with all available means, strives to destroy this inner peace. The consumer system, the attention economy, the industry of perpetual anxiety, the machine of information noise. It fills our loneliness with bustle. It turns it into a market for goods and services. Afraid of loneliness? Buy this course, subscribe to this blogger, download this app, buy these headphones, and you'll always be with someone. You'll always be busy. You'll never be left alone with that terrible silence. And we buy. We buy distraction. We buy noise. We fill the silence because it frightens us more than anything else in the world. Perhaps the main historical challenge of our time, the main task for our soul, is not the fight against loneliness, but the fight for it, for the right to our inner silence, for the skill to use it, for the courage sometimes, at least occasionally, to turn off all external voices in order to finally hear our own. Because if you think about it, what is the voice of conscience? It's a voice that sounds only in silence. In the bustle, we don't hear it. What is intuition, that inner gut feeling that so often helps us out? It's a whisper, completely drowned out by city noise and digital hum. What, in the end, is our authentic self, our personality? It is not the sum of our social roles. It's not the number of likes and followers. It's not our job title or salary. It is the one who remains when all the masks fall away, when all the noise subsides, when you are left alone in an empty room. Who is there? A friend or an enemy? An interesting companion or an emptiness? And here we are at the finale. You've been left alone with this text, with my voice that has been sounding in your head. I've been your conversationalist, but I am only a voice. And now this voice falls silent. The silence returns. It's already here, waiting beyond the final words. And the most interesting part begins right now, at this moment. What happens next in this silence depends only on you. Will you get scared and immediately turn on the next podcast, music, series, dive into the feed? Will you fill the emerging void with the familiar noise? Or will you stay in it, at least for 5 minutes, at least for 1 minute? Just sit, listening, to your breath, to your heartbeat, to whatever surfaces in your consciousness. The choice is yours. This is, perhaps, the main freedom we have left. Thank you for being with me on this long and hopefully not boring journey. Thank you for your time and attention, the most precious gifts in our era. Until we meet again in the space of history and thought, take care of yourself and take care of your silence. You need it more than you think. The end. Sweet dreams.